The calories she had me eating was very, very low. But I was like, you know what? Like, I need to make this change. I'm hell-bent determined, so I'm going to do it. And so I started this out, and I was dizzy. I had no energy to get out of my chair. For the first 4 weeks, I lost like 30 pounds, which no one should lose 30 pounds
that
in 4
quickly.
weeks. That's not healthy.
Yeah.
And the ironic thing is that, all of a sudden I was this poster child for her program. Victoria lost 30 pounds in 4 weeks and la la la.
Hi everyone, it's Tara the Remote Yogi, and today I'm joined with another friend I met here in Bali. This is Victoria Evans, and she is an intuitive eating coach who works a lot with athletes who are kind of transitioning back into the real world and people who have suffered from eating disorders. And I know a lot of people who listen and watch my YouTube channel and the blog have gone through similar issues with the mental health and things. So I'm excited to get her on today and just chat a bit about her story and the kind of work that she's doing to help people work through these traumas.
Yeah,
welcome
thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and chat more about it because, we talk about mental health so much more in our society, but I still think eating disorders, it really lacks that conversation, and I think it's really the time right now to talk about it.
Yeah, and I feel like there's still a lot of taboo around
absolutely.
eating disorders. I mean, there still is some around like depression and anxiety, but it's starting, like you said, to be talked about more than the eating disorders are, and they usually go kind of hand in hand.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, let's just dive in deep. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story, why this is such a important topic for you to talk about.
Yeah, so I grew up as an athlete. It was really my identity, and my parents put me in sports. I was always the volleyball girl. And as someone I'm 5'10" now, but literally from the age of 5, I was like significantly taller. Like I was the head above you take the class picture, I was the middle and the back every time, they do like stack it up. And so I just always felt like I stuck out. Like it didn't matter what the situation was, I was the one with the bigger shoulders sticking out with my friends. And so I always kind of got treated older, I always got treated differently. And quickly, sports kind of became a refuge for me, specifically volleyball. And so that was really my outlet and became who I was. And that very quickly transitioned, however, into something very negative with a lot of pressure when it came to kind of competing at that higher level. So in university, actually, is when I played higher level volleyball. I played NCAA, and something that had been my stress reliever all throughout, my childhood and where I could go to really feel good about myself. And my coaching, I talk a lot about like how your brain functions as it relates to different sports and doing different things. And so for me, something like serotonin and oxytocin when it comes to sports, like it was how I fit in with people, that connection, oxytocin, serotonin, gaining that social advantage. So for me, it was a way I could combat mental health, my depression and anxiety with sports. It was a way I could fit in. And so it was really my saving grace. But in university, when everyone's the best, you're no longer the best. And all of a sudden, what went from, what kind of held my eating problems and my depression at bay became a catalyst. And so in university, my weight kind of started to take off because I was no longer able to use sports as that refuge for myself. And
it just became like a stressor.
It became a stressor. So it was once that stress reliever, all of a sudden it was a stress inducer. And that was that one place where I fit in. I was, always the tallest, and now it was I fit in here. But if everyone is straight up and down, I was always the bigger one. But at least if I was the bigger one, I was the best one.
Yeah.
And now I wasn't the best one, and I was the bigger one. And I had a coach yelling at me. And I was put against all these other girls from around the country who are the best at it. And that was really, really hard. Yeah, so that's when my eating started to take off. And my entire life, my eating was kind of, like I said, kept at bay by being very athletic. But all of a sudden, eating became this really easy coping mechanism for me to just basically deal with all this added stress. And so I was eating, but my activity level was no longer matching it. I was just eating beyond. So I gained a lot of weight, unfortunately. And I gained 65 pounds from, I'd say like about between grade 10 to, until end of university, it was about 65 pounds, which was a lot of weight for anyone. But someone who's trying to be a high performance athlete, that's a whack ton of weight.
Yeah.
And again, it really was this complete lost identity, because no longer was I not just this athlete, this volleyball girl. All of a sudden I was this bigger girl, and I was in a different country, and I was because I'm Canadian, I was in the States, and I was, in school away from home, and I felt so isolated. I was so depressed. I completely cut myself off. I had high levels of anxiety from feeling overweight and not feeling good enough and sticking out. And then add in the weight aspect and add in the stress of school, and it was like this perfect storm. And so when I graduated and I was kind of at the peak of all this,
yeah,
I had moved to Montreal. And at Montreal, I began a job at a top level beauty company. And
more pressure.
It was, when I say, I don't know if you've seen Ugly Betty. Have you ever seen the show Ugly Betty?
I've seen, I know what it is.
Okay,
yeah.
there's like, she walks in this office, and it's like all glass, and it's very Vogue kind of looking, and everyone there is all, like very decked out, heels. And I walked in the first day, and I was wearing like these frumpy clothes, like I think I had Floods like business pants, and these girls are like in like satin dresses, like heels, red lipstick. I'm like, oh my gosh, again, I'm not gonna fit in here. And for the first 6 months, I sat at my desk and ate lunch every day, and basically just like fed myself my feelings and felt terrible about it, and was in a new city by myself, and just seemed to always be isolating myself.
And yeah, it seems to be a pattern, like that I'm not fitting in.
Yeah, I'm not fitting in, but then a self-fulfilling prophecy, because once you think I'm not fitting in, you further isolate yourself.
Yeah.
So it was just like, I'm not fitting in, let me go eat lunch by myself, where I will again not fit in. But after a death in the family, I decided that, I'm going to make a big change in my life. Like, I need to start living. And at the time, I thought weight loss was the answer. I thought that weight was the one thing that my entire life was that piece that was holding me back from fitting in. That if I could just lose enough weight, then I was going to connect with these people. Then I was going to, my anxiety was going to go away, my depression, like I was going to start living. And so I just became on this like hell-bent mission. I know other athletes can kind of relate to, sometimes you get this idea in your mind about, you want to win this competition, and all of a sudden it generates this motivation, this power to like get up and do early workouts and do crazy things. And so I fell into this mindset. And for the first few months, it was what you could kind of consider healthy weight loss, in the sense it was like, oh, I'm just going to eat a little bit less and work out a little bit more. But unfortunately, I ended up going on a vacation. And when I came back from vacation, I had gained like a few pounds, like 8 pounds back of the 20 I had lost in those few months. And I freaked out.
Yeah, all the shame comes back.
I was like, oh my God, like I just worked so hard for this.
Yeah.
Like people started to say hi to me at work, they noticing I can't go back to this, I don't want to be that other version of Victoria who's a loser, who's overweight, who doesn't fit in. And I just started to like spiral. And so I did what everyone does. I go to the internet and I go to Instagram. And I had been following this one fitness influencer who's like an IFBB champion, which is like the bikini models.
Yeah.
So this woman who's like shredded abs, and I did a 12-week weight loss guaranteed plan with her. And so I signed up for the plan, and I get the everything, and I'm like, okay, I guess so. It looks a little bit low calorie, and the workouts, like I'm an athlete, I can do the workouts, but the food wise, it looks very low, like calorically. And again, like I'm someone who's 5'10", and pretty much always been sheer muscle. So even when I was overweight, it was just, this was all under it. It was just,
yeah.
So the calories she had me eating was very, very low. But I was like, you know what? Like, I need to make this change. I'm hell-bent determined, so I'm going to do it. And so I started this out, and I was dizzy. I had no energy to get out of my chair. So the first 4 weeks, I lost like 30 pounds, which no one should lose 30 pounds
that
in
quickly.
4 weeks. That's not healthy.
Yeah.
And the ironic thing is that, you know, all of a sudden I was this poster child for her program. Victoria lost 30 pounds in 4 weeks and la la la, and like, look at her.
Creating a new identity.
And I messaged her and said, hey, you know, I feel really dizzy. I'm feeling really tired. Like, I think maybe the calories are a bit too low. She's like, no. You just have more coffee in the morning, intermittent fast, so it seems like you're getting more food. It's normal to feel hungry when you're dieting. Your stomach's shrinking. And I was like, kind of, you know, when you think something sounds wrong, you're like, okay, that's a bit of a red flag, but you're really like, no, I'm really gonna just listen to that. They know what they're doing. She has
also
abs.
like that comes into the whole like Instagram influencer.
Yeah,
thing.
you think they're an
expect that
expert.
they know what they're doing, and a lot of the
Exactly.
times they don't. Yeah,
They don't. And so I like kind of pressed on in this regime from hell, and now adding in intermittent fasting into it, and now adding in Monster energy drinks, like the 0 calorie. Like I was basically pumping my body full of caffeine all morning, and then starving essentially. It was close to like 1,100, 1,200 calories a day. And then I was someone who became so obsessive about losing weight that I was working out 1-2 hours a day. So like I was in an extreme calorie deficit, like extreme.
When I think that's like something important to touch on too is a lot of the times people like with eating disorders or with any kind of mental health, they might have like fine eating, but it's like the addiction to working out is a problem as well. Like I had struggled with that. Some of my friends
absolutely, and it's so common because we kind of get in our head like, oh, it's almost like a moral value thing where like we go to the gym, we're a good person, and you know, eat like really clean, we're a good person. But it can become obsessive so quickly. And I know for me, I'm someone who struggled with, you know, being like over exercising, and that's who I work with a lot now with these women, is finding that balance again. Because your eating can be fine, but if you feel like you have to work out every day, you need to get that in, it becomes almost like being a drug addict. It's like you have to get that fix. And I know for me, I would literally picture my muscles and my like melting away and fat creeping in if I missed one day of a workout. Like I would literally just be like, I can't come to lunch today, you guys. I have to go to the gym. I would be canceling plans. And the ironic
and also you identify as like the girl who works out.
Exactly.
Right?
So it was now my identity, and it became again like that, your identity and this value where it's like, this is who I am, this is who I want to be, and I need to keep up this front. And that was extremely difficult. And so as I kind of continued to push on and I continued to lose weight, the thing was I was not eating enough calories, obviously, right? And I was working out. And so my body basically would send me into these crazy binges. And at the time I was like, why am I self-sabotaging? Like people are noticing me at work, you know, like someone invited me to lunch today. People are asking me for weight loss tips. Like all of a sudden my identity went from being, you know, an athlete to invisible to inspiration. Look at me. Like all of a sudden I went from being invisible for so many years and feeling like I had no value and that I stuck out to all of a sudden being the center of this attention. And it was this attention that I'd craved my entire life. Like this positive, look at you, you're successful, you're doing well. And it was like an addiction. So even though I didn't have the energy to get out of my chair to walk to a meeting, the energy that I got was someone walking up to me and saying, you look amazing. What are you doing? And the ironic thing, and I listened to a poetry online about this, and it basically said, if you're underweight and you have an eating disorder, you go to the hospital. If you're overweight and you have an eating disorder, you're an inspiration. And so for me, all of a sudden, I was an inspiration. And I didn't know how to not anymore. I didn't know how to come back and find balance because I knew how I was living was destructive. I knew it wasn't healthy, but I didn't know any alternative. I couldn't go back to being that girl again. And I was willing to sacrifice my health as a result of it. And not just my physical health, my mental health. Because all of a sudden, this was my new identity. And this was who I had to be to kind of keep up this idea that everything's good. And even though I was still extremely depressed and anxious. And in my mind, I still thought I was going to eventually get to a goal weight where I was happy. Because even though my weight was going down, I still thought, okay, just a few more pounds and then it'll be okay. And then I'll stop and that'll be good. But the thing about eating disorders, it's never enough.
Yeah.
There's never an end.
Well, then there's also like the body dysmorphia issue
Absolutely.
where like you always see more weight on your body than is actually there.
Yes. Yeah. You get completely distorted. And I know for me, I was looking in the mirror and I would see days where I thought, oh, I look really good today. And I remember my mom being like, you look terrible. Like, you look awful. And being offended, be like, she doesn't even know what she's talking about. It's just because she knows what I looked like before. Other people are saying I look good. And other people saying, like, I don't look sickly. And so you totally skew everything people say to you. You know, you look healthy means I look fat today. You look good today is like, oh, I don't look great. Like, everything people say, you become very, like, hyper vigilant of, like, every single word people are saying. And it's so easy to misinterpret. And yeah, it's kind of this whole mindset where everything becomes about food, everything becomes about your body. And for me, when it came to the eating, because I was not eating enough and I was starting to binge basically at night. And I was like, why am I sabotaging myself? But it's your body's natural response to being in that starvation mode. And so I talk a lot about my clients, so I do one-on-one coaching with women who have eating disorders, is like, you know, they're like, why do I do this to myself? And your midbrain, the part of your brain that's like very primitive, I call it Lizzie the lizard brain. So basically she's saving your life. Like, her job is to keep you alive. And so for her, if she notices you haven't eaten anything all day, then she's going to do everything in her power to convince your brain to tell you to go and eat all those food. Because she doesn't know that people are finally talking to you at work. She doesn't know that your identity all of a sudden is being this skinny, tiny little person. She just knows this person doesn't eat. She's going to collapse. So let me send every single signal in her brain to go get her to eat 5,000 calories of food tonight. And for me, that was filled with shame and why am I doing this to myself? And so it was only through understanding now, like, and in my recovery, how my brain actually functions, that I was just trying to save my own life, but I completely had misinterpreted it. And so I think, you know, like, so for me, the binging quickly turned into bulimia. Because I couldn't justify eating that much food, obviously. You know, like, if it's this is my identity now, I can't gain this weight back. I can't sabotage myself. Yeah, exactly. So that quickly turned to bulimia, and then that became a habit. And so I struggled for a while with this facade of Victoria intermittent fast. So I would intermittent fast all day at work. People knew that. It was like a thing. And then, so I felt like I couldn't even start eating again, or people would be like, oh, do you want to have some cake in the break room? Like, oh no, Victoria doesn't do that. And so it became like this, like, this was who I was, and I didn't know how to break out of it. And then I would have like one meal, and I'd go to the gym at lunch, working out all the time. Then I'd come home and I would eat everything. Uber Eats was my best friend, like, because I wouldn't keep any food in the house. I was too afraid I was going to eat it. So basically my cupboards were completely empty other than coffee. And then I would just order everything at night. And I'm talking hundreds of dollars of food almost nightly. And so I was broke. My credit cards are maxed, but people were still telling me I looked good. So it kind of just like kept on in this completely disordered way. Yeah.
So
yeah.
How'd you pull yourself out of that? Now you're like actually an inspiration by talking about it and helping other people. What got you to make that shift?
It was so hard because, and I'm not going to lie and say like recovery was like this.
No, it never is.
It never is. And I feel like people, they think that once they have this idea that now they want to get better, that it's going to be like this. And then the first time something goes wrong, they are like, oh, well, of course it did, because I'm not capable of this. But if you've spent so long living one way, you can't expect to have just one change of thought, or even a dozen or 2 dozen or even 100 changes of thought that are going to all of a sudden get you to here.
Right.
And so for me, it was one night, which was the first kind of real, like, I need to change this. After, every night, especially people who are binging and bulimic, every time you say it's the last time. Every time you say tomorrow is going to be different. And a lot of that now I know is that part of your brain basically justifying that you do it, basically. It's kind of, I call Lizzie, like, what is Lizzie saying to you right now? And it's that dopamine of like, it's the anticipation of the reward. So it's, if you could just have this now, then it's going to be fine. It's very now thinking when you're binging and you're bulimic.
Well, anytime you're dealing with like a lot of anxiety and depression,
Yes.
you really can't future think
Exactly.
at all. You're like so focused on like right this second.
Exactly. And so, yeah, it's like especially with these types of foods, like these very sugary processed foods that really send you into those like dopamine surges that like, oh my God, it's like almost like a feeding frenzy.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're almost two different people. And it's because it's that midbrain that is seeking out the now versus that prefrontal cortex, that front 1/3 part of your brain that is that future thinking, the real you. So it's like, I don't want to do this right now, but the middle part of your brain is like, no, do it.
Yeah, you really need this.
And it's like almost like this devil angel thing on your shoulder. And then after, when you're really in your prefrontal cortex, you're like, why did I do that again? Like, what is wrong with me? But in that moment, you couldn't possibly imagine doing anything else. Mm-hmm. And so for me, after having days and nights and nights of doing this the last time, I had one morning, I decided as if I felt like it was a choice, but I had gone out of bed and I ate like probably about a pound of trail mix. It was like one thing I'd had in my cupboards, and because I was absolutely starving, and I had purged as much of it as I thought I could, but I was still so afraid because I knew, I was like, oh my God, there's so many calories in trail mix. And so this was at 3 a.m. and I got up and I went on a 25-kilometer run at 3 a.m. And I was sitting on the floor, tying up my shoes, crying, like crawling to the closet, getting changed into my running clothes because I didn't want to go on a run. I was so tired. And like, this was eating like 1,100 calories a day and then not even really eating them because I was also purging them. And then not sleeping, because I had so much anxiety at night. So I was going to bed 2, 3, 4 a.m. and then getting up at 6 a.m. And so completely sleep deprived, pumped full of caffeine, anxiety, like I couldn't even sit down during the day. Like I had a standing desk at work. Like I didn't sit down once at all during the day. And I would just be collapsing at night from exhaustion. Like my going to bed was literally falling onto the ground. And so I went on this 25-kilometer run and I was crying the entire time, because I didn't know how to not go on this run, because I couldn't just sit at my house at 3 a.m. and go back to sleep knowing I maybe had calories in my body that weren't being burned. And so I was in Montreal, and people who know Montreal, there's a big mountain in it. So the top of the mountain, by the time I'd kind of gotten all the way up there and around, the sun was coming up over the city. And I was like, okay, I need to fucking change. Like it was just it was the absolute lowest moment that I needed to see, okay, I can't live this way. It's not worth it, because I still wasn't happy.
Right. And you have to like get so low. Like I talk about often in my story, like I had to have so many nights of me like having panic attacks in the bottom of my shower to be like, enough of this. Mm-hmm. Like I can't do this anymore.
Absolutely. And so many people too, you can't save someone else as well. It has to be coming from within. Yeah. So even though no one knew that I was struggling, and for me, I thought sharing my depression, my anxiety, my eating disorder was a weakness. So no one knew how much I was struggling, but at the same time, it's only you who can pull yourself out of it. Yeah. But you do need help. Mm-hmm. And that's what I thought. I thought, so every night when I was telling myself, tomorrow's a new day, I was thinking this was my own problem. Like this was my cross to bear. I've got myself into this mess. I have to get myself out of it. And so when I was standing on top of that mountain, I was like, hey, something needs to change here. And so when I got home, I called the eating disorder hotline. And that was the first time in my life I told anyone that I had an eating disorder. Mm-hmm. And I talked and bawled to this anonymous lady on the phone for hours. And it was emotionally draining, but it was also this huge release. Mm-hmm. And from there, all of a sudden, it removed all this shame, because eating disorders, they thrive in shame, and same with mental health. It's the secrecy, but when you bring light to it and you talk about it, it relieves that. And so it was like that first kind of step. It was that first step in the right direction of recovery, and it kind of set me on this path where I said, okay, like I can do this, but I'm going to have to pull in other resources to help me. Mm-hmm. So so that was kind of the first step. Like I said, recovery is not like this.
Yeah.
And so through my work, I had insurance to go, thankfully, and get counseling. So I started going to counseling. And what for me was really difficult, though, was in this counseling, basically, it was all emotions based. And I'm someone who's very scientific. I need to understand how things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And for basically, it was like, okay, every time you're stressed, every time that you're emotionally overwhelmed, you're going to eat. So there I was like, how do I exist as a human being without having a human experience with human emotions? So anytime anything would happen, I'd just be like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to binge and then I'm going to have to purge. And like, I was living on eggshells. So
yeah, like no crazy change of emotions.
yeah, I was like trying to basically live like this because I didn't know, like any fluctuation would be like, well, of course I'm going to go and eat. Like that's what they said was going to happen. And it was so limiting and so overwhelming to kind of like think that was basically what was going to happen to me. So I was like, okay, I need to understand how my brain is working. Like this emotion side is I need something to anchor this in. And so that's when I really started going deep into understanding the science behind eating disorders, the brain, the body. Like, and I say deep, I mean like if you would have walked into my room, like my apartment, you would have thought a crazy person lived there. It was like, you know, when those like CSI murder thing with like arrows and like string and like literally my entire apartment was papers and like highlighted and scans of the brain, how the body functions. And for me, I had to go so deep into this to basically remove that shame aspect again. Because now I know it makes total sense why I was binging, why I was bulimic, why I had anxiety, why I had depression. All of a sudden, when you educate yourself on something, it removes that fear of it.
When I always talk about like with anxiety, like the biggest thing for me was understanding the mechanisms in the brain and knowing that I wasn't broken.
Exactly.
That my brain was
you're not sick.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. This is just how the brain works. But then it also makes you feel like you have way more control when you understand the mechanisms.
So much more empowered.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I went from being this victim who was powerless over her emotions to this like force and this wealth of knowledge that basically saved my own life. And so, yeah, I had to go into like the neurotransmitters. I look at the vagus nerve, like the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's the fight or flight versus the rest and digest. And so as I was moving through my recovery, I needed this anchor of the science behind it in order to understand the emotional side as well. Because I think it's coming together of the two things. Right. It's definitely twofold. But in order for me to get to that place where I can even work on my emotions, I need to be in the right headspace to do so. And that comes from, you know, being in that like resting and digesting and kind of understanding how our body functions.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing too, is you have to be able to marry them. And I think some people can approach the emotional side easier and then they need to figure out the rest of it later or like vice versa. But I think that's the biggest thing is like try it from different angles and slowly like you'll move into the directions you need for healing. And
that's the thing for me, it's not a one size fit all. You know, like the people I work with, I will turn people away who are super one side versus the other. You know, they don't fit what I'm trying to do because recovery is not one size fits all.
Yeah, they like don't want to emotionally talk about it. Just tell me what's happening in the brain. You're like, it doesn't work.
Exactly, and like that's really great, and it's really good to have the understanding. But it's like you're only gonna get to here, and it's almost like you're white knuckling it to here, and you need to go back and do a lot of this work. And for me as well, the emotional side of things comes into doing what I call a lot of trauma work. And so trauma is not necessarily like huge things; it can be little things. Yeah. But the traumas are basically what reside in your central nervous system. So it anchors in terms of the emotional side of things with the science side of things. So you can go back and do that work. Like, why did these eating habits begin? So like you have these eating habits now, but like, why did it start? Right. And it starts off through an emotion, like the restricting, the dieting, the thinking that the weight loss is going to make you happy. Right. That starts in the emotions base. That starts in, you know, the limiting beliefs. Then that turns into the science. And then we bring it back to the emotion. So it's kind of, it all goes together. So if someone's just like, I just want to talk about emotions, or I just want to talk about science, it's like, that's cool for you, that's great. But for me and for my clients, what I know works best is this. And I'm happy to work with you if that's it. But like, I think it's different for everyone, and people just kind of need to find out their own path as well.
Yeah, and being able to, and it's really important too that like people can be willing to dig into the past. Yes. Because with anxiety, with any kind of trauma, with eating disorders, whatever, like it stems back to something
Yes.
deeper. So I always feel like worry is something that just is in the head. Like I'm worried about like this interview with my boss and what's going to happen, and like that worries. When it comes into like anxiety, it's like this deep rooted thing, and it stems from like a deeper belief about like something that's going to happen because this is who you are. Deep down, you're just not worthy of anything or whatever. So like with you, it like must have stemmed deeper into the whole like I don't belong thing. And whenever that was originally triggered, you've got to go back and heal that work, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so the trauma work that I do, I'll just give you like a super, super quick synopsis of kind of like what basically that means. And so for the trauma work, it's basically, like because I do everything from evolution basically. So if hundreds of years ago, if your mom was killed by a tiger, essentially, in your brain, you think, okay, yellow or big orange things are killing me, like they're going to kill me. And so then 20 years later, you see an orangutan coming towards you and your body's already gone. You're already running because your body, your central nervous system has held this belief that orange things kill me. And so it's the same thing today. So it's something, like none of the older kids played with me because I was taller because I looked older. So my tiger, my like belief became, I stick out, so I'm not loved. I'm bigger, so I'm not going to fit in. I'm not cute. I'm not going to be worthy. So all these limiting beliefs came around that. And so then everything that reminds me of that particular scenario, that way of thinking, that limited belief, all of a sudden was like a threat to me. I became hyper vigilant of everything that looked like I might be sticking out. So all of a sudden, like my whole life, my shoulders are hunched over. I'm going to be standing in the back. I'm going to be always trying to lose weight to fit in. I'm going to be dieting every 2 seconds. And all that came back to, for me, I thought being smaller meant fitting in and being loved. And so going back and doing that trauma work and understanding and basically healing my nervous system, which has held on to this belief since I was a child that being small meant being loved, and doing that work to heal it. And so, but you can only heal it when you're in that parasympathetic state. So your vagus nerve, which runs from your head all the way down to your stomach, which is also when we talk about that gut feeling, that's your vagus nerve.
Yeah.
And your vagus nerve basically triggers whether or not you're in your parasympathetic, which is the rest to digest, or your sympathetic, which is your fight or flight. And if you're anxious and depressed, you're in that fight or flight. And for a long time, everything was like, oh my God, it's too much. Like I'm very anxious. And the same thing I know we were chatting before when it came to, them wanting to hospitalize me for recovery, basically. In a hospital setting, I found it was very stressful for me. And you can only do real healing and real, really recovery if you're in that restful, that digesting, that kind of place where you can really get better. And so, it's so important when you're doing that trauma work that you feel very calm and really relaxed in order to kind of move through that.
Yeah, and I definitely want to dive into like engaging the parasympathetics. That's a lot of what I do, obviously, as a yoga teacher.
Exactly.
But before we dive into that, you just like mentioned the hospital thing.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important that you're doing what you're doing, because so many times the only option is to hospitalize somebody when they're dealing with a mental disorder. Like I almost was hospitalized for depression at 12 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I wasn't, only because I've heard so many horror stories of people who are like being forced to eat, who are like kind of being put in these weird situations. And how can you heal when you're that traumatized? And that was, even talk about it now, literally, I get like, it literally is anxiety provoking for me to think about, because I remember having the conversations and looking at the facilities and it being so cold and so clinical, and basically like they're feeding you like Jello and pudding, and for someone who literally was weighing every single ounce of their food, like, and I kid you, I was like 0.00/1, I was like picking off the piece of lettuce. Like that's how obsessive I was. To all of a sudden I'm in a hospital being given pudding. With no control.
With no control. Like I went from controlling everything to controlling nothing. Like you said, like that is the most anxiety, stressful, fight or flight mode I can think of. And you can't recover if you're that stressed. Like that's not how you can get better. And so some people do go to hospital and they do well. Like it really depends on the person. I'm not saying one avenue is better for another person. Certain facilities, there's private facilities, there's a lot of different options. But I know for me, it was not going to be a way that I could truly get better. And so I had to, okay, this is my options. Either I can go into hospital and basically have this experience where I genuinely don't know if it's going to just make me worse because it's too anxiety provoking for me, or I can just throw myself into the science and give everything I can to understanding my brain and my body and basically push myself and hope that that is what is going to help me. And thankfully it was.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I'm like so glad that I like avoided that just because I can imagine it would have been hard for me. But getting back into the parasympathetic, so of course I talk a lot about this with anxiety and depression.
Yes.
Because again, eating disorder, depression, anxiety, it's all the same thing.
Yeah. It's not mutually exclusive.
Yeah. And you know what? That's why I do a lot of meditation and breath work, especially for me, has been huge. I'd love to hear what you suggest.
Yeah, so I do a lot of breath work. Because if it's even simple things like having a longer exhale than a longer inhale triggers your parasympathetic nervous system. And so with my clients, the first few sessions, you really understand the brain. But as we move through and we're doing kind of that trauma and that healing work, it's so important for us to do breath work. And because we need to get into that parasympathetic state first in order to really heal that central nervous system. So like, stop your body from running away from the tiger, your central nervous system needs to know, okay, this is a safe situation. We can kind of let go of this trauma. We can let go of this feeling. And once you let that go, then no longer are you going to be looking for the tiger. You can actually just live your life, because if you're hypervigilant of everything, that's anxiety, that's depression, that's eating disorders. And so my tigers were quickly became chocolate and food, and like everything was like stressing me out.
Yeah.
But when I can go back and release and realize, okay, I was doing the best I could and doing basically all that trauma healing work, which starts with the breath work, that's how you move through that and get better. And so I do a lot of box breathing, which is that tactical breathing. I don't know if you know
I call it force square breathing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So it's technically,
Square breathing
because I do longer than the 4-4-4. So it's like the inhale you can do 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. I usually do longer than that. I work my way up through that. But basically it's triggering that parasympathetic, and it's the easiest way to trigger that parasympathetic nervous system. And it's, you're not needing to bring in other stimulus and other different, drugs or anything in your life. You can literally just use your own body as a way to heal yourself, which is what I love, because especially when with eating disorders, you want to have that control, and breath work is something you can control.
Exactly. And I think breath work's one of those things that you can do. I mean, there's crazy ones where you're breathing in and out. Whatever. But square breathing and just deep belly breathing to get into the diaphragm, you can do that at your desk without anyone noticing that you're doing it. And I think things like that are really important. We can't just stop and drop and do yoga whenever we want,
So
we can stop and breathe whenever we want. That's a huge thing to have in your toolbox.
It's huge. And from a very, very early on, for example, I have my Google calendars and my recovery, and I literally I think it was 30 minutes, I had a reminder in my phone to do box breathing. So every 30 minutes on my phone would come up at my desk, it said box breathing. And I would just stand up, I had a little square at my desk, I'd trace it with my pen, and I would just literally just kind of drop back into my body when I felt like I was getting really up here about food. I'm am I hungry, am I eating? And it's you just breathe, and I do 30 seconds to a minute, even not even a ton early on. Now I do more, but it just kind of when I'd start to get like this, it would just kind of bring me back down again. And I literally had just set reminders on my phone. And so with my clients now, I have them do a lot of scheduling, literally just check-ins with themselves constantly throughout the day, setting them on their phones just to kind of remind to bring you back. Because it's so easy to just hot air balloon off into the world. And then at the end of the day, you're just oh my God, where did I even get to? And so that constant check-in throughout the day kind of keeps you grounded.
Yeah. Which even as somebody who's now coaching on it, and me as a coach, I feel we have to be really upfront with our clients and be we still falter all the time, right? I'll give you an example. A couple months ago, I was living here in Ubud, where we are now, and I have a workaholism tendency. So like, you know, what used to be like drug and alcohol turned into like overworking out and food control, and then it turned into workaholism. It just like moves.
Oh yeah.
And so I've been doing a lot of work on my workaholism for the last couple of years. But while I was here in New Britain, I was like, I'm going to make sure I'm not working too much by making sure I'm doing self-care. Yeah. So I was like crazy scheduling like massages and yoga and like all these things to make sure I was taking care of myself. Problem is, that became like an obsession as well. The self-care was an obsession. Yeah. And I was at a yoga class and I was so dizzy. And it was a few times in a row where I was just so dizzy at the end of the class. And I finally was like, okay, I'm just going to go stand on a scale just to see what's going on here. I was back to high school weight. Yeah. After a month of focus on self-care, but because it became an obsession, and that's just how my body naturally reacts, I like quickly dropped back into like it being a disorder and lost so much weight. And then also what happened is I was like looking at myself in the mirror, and just part of my brain was like, look how good you look. Yes. And I had to be like, no, this isn't healthy. But you know, like that's still the tendency. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I know for me, when I first got here, I was feeling really good about myself when I first got to Canggu, like into Bali a few weeks ago. And I got here, and you know, the first day I was by the pool and I was like, oh, I feel okay. But very quickly you see very, very thin women. And I kid you not when I say that, like, Bali is like the mecca of like influencer model, skinny, beautiful women. Yeah. Like everywhere you look, you're like, she probably has 2 million followers, and there's like a guy following her, like, I got it. Like literally, she's like, the boyfriends like, everywhere. Like the hand going back, you know, like they're walking across the bridge, and she's like, la la la, and like here I am, like very, like I love being strong, I love being empowered, so I'm very physically, like I'm cut, and so when I'm seeing these women, and I look at myself in pictures, and I'm like, I look like a boy. What's happening? Yeah. Like I look terrible. And all of a sudden, like, you know, in a matter of days, I went from being like leaving Canada, being like, girl, look at you. You are so strong, to like, oh my God, I need to never lift another weight again. But then how do I not gain fat by losing muscle mass? And all of a sudden I was calculating, I was like, and then the macro, and then I was like, whoa. But it's so easy, especially when you're out of your environment and then you're constantly confronted with that. Yeah. And like you said, when it comes to workaholism or anything like that, it's so easy. I call it like putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. And so like with the dieting, with the exercising, it's just you're basically just being like, that looks really painful. Just stick a Band-Aid on it. It's fine. Until you do go back and do that work and do the trauma work and understand, why am I doing this to begin with? Like, what am I running from? What do I think weight loss is going to achieve? What do I think this body is going to bring to me? Because the only reason we do anything is because we think it's going to make us happy, that it's going to make us connected. But that's an inside job. Yeah. And unfortunately, it took me almost dying to really come into that. Because I lost all this weight and I still wasn't happy and I still wasn't really feeling connected with people. And so now I realize that happiness is regardless of your weight. It doesn't matter what you look like. It's a choice. And it comes down to like that deep self-love, self-worth. So a lot of my coaching is more around the self-worth, because for me, like that's the biggest thing. Why am I a workaholic? Because I feel like I have to prove my worthiness through how much value I can give to the world. Yes. And so if I'm not making a lot of money, if I'm not bringing in new clients, where's my worth coming from? Yes. And I have to constantly like break that down. Absolutely. And with your body, and so much of body is, you know, and it's so hard in our society to not equate our body with our self-worth. Oh, she's eating a kale salad. Oh, look at her, like she has her shit together. But like I was the one eating the kale salad, and I couldn't have had farther from my shit together. Right. Like I was unhappier, more anxious and more stressed and more like just a basket case when I was at my lowest weight than I was when I was at my highest weight. And I think it's so important for people to realize that, you know, I always tell like this Buddhist monk saying, it's like all beings suffer. So even though I see these beautiful Instagram model people here, they're still suffering. They're still not necessarily happy. Yeah. It doesn't matter that they have the perfect stomach. They're probably maybe thinking all day that they can't eat food. And that, you know, like they only have this many followers and they need to go get this injection so that their boyfriend actually likes them. And it's like we get caught up and we create these stories of what self-worth looks like. Yeah. And then we project it when we realize like no one has their shit figured out, A. B, we're all just doing the best we can.
and see, like, we get to decide what self-worth is for ourselves. And the sooner we can do that and make positive and, like, my coaching, intuitive choices about that. And I think intuitive is really just that expansive, like, listening to yourself, which after years of dieting and years of, you know, kind of restricting yourself and thinking a certain way is very hard to get back to. It's like peeling back all these layers, but it's I think it's really the only way to live and feel truly at peace and be happy.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about the intuitive eating, and we're getting close to wrapping things up, so I know I don't want to take up your time today. But I want to just touch again on the Instagram thing.
Yes.
Because I see this being a problem over and over again, whether it's in the yoga community and the fitness community. And I love that you brought up the point of you having worked through an influencer for your weight loss. Yeah. And it having been, like, traumatic.
Oh my gosh, exactly.
So many people are, like, comparing themselves to Instagram. I mean, we're in Bali, like you said, like the land of influencers. They're everywhere. Yeah. Like, what kind of advice do you give your clients when it comes to, like, that comparison that's taking place with social media nowadays?
I think it's really important to not only look at if someone has credentials, because I think a lot of people have, especially when it comes to nutrition and fitness, because if someone is telling you exactly what to put into your body, someone's telling you exactly how to live your life, and they have no business doing that, I think that's a red flag. If they, for example, this woman, she's like, I have my husband lock up my peanut butter at night in a safe. That's a red flag.
Yeah, that's not something that you want to trust.
That's not someone you want to trust. But when it comes to, you know, honestly, anything, I think you, at the core of it, fuck everyone else. Yeah. Because everyone, you know, has their own voice on Instagram. Everyone can tell you how to live your life. But at the end of the day, you need to listen to yourself because they're not you. Yeah. And as much as I would, you know, I would try to be this lady on Instagram, as much as I, you know, I've tried to be the really skinny girl holding the hand boyfriend going over the bridge and trying to be that person, that's not who I am, and that's not who I'm ever going to be. And until I realize that sooner and start to literally just listen to my intuitive self, you're always just going to be chasing that dream, and you're never going to be happy because, you can only be yourself. You will fail at being someone else 100% of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even, like, when it comes to like my coaching, so my deeper coaching, I go into helping people with, like, food plans and in fitness and things. But even then I approach it more from an intuitive eating. So I'm excited to talk about that. More about, like, how to slow down enough to listen to your body, to be conscious, to be grateful, to have a different mindset towards food. That's more what I talk about. Less than, like, you shouldn't have eggs, you should have, like, I don't do that. Yeah. Tell me more about your version of intuitive or conscious eating.
So for me, intuitive eating, like I said, it's about that expansive feeling and listening to your body. And I feel like we are so used to ignoring it. We're like, oh, we're hungry, good. We'll just hold that out till later. Like, a lot of my clients, they engage in the restriction side of things, and it becomes this moral value of, like, look how much I'm not gonna eat that chocolate. And it's like this chip on the shoulder, like, oh, Kelly ate the chocolate, but I'm not going to eat the chocolate. And it becomes this thing so it's like this deprivation, which then leads to the restriction, then the binging. And so the mindset around intuitive eating is, like, how can you live in a way where you are honoring your body? And honoring your body means listening to your body, and listening to your body takes time, essentially. And so we want that overnight fix of, like, no, I'm just perfectly eating intuitively. But it's rewiring the brain, and that comes from the understanding of how your brain functions, what happens when you get too hungry, what happens when you get too tired. And so starting from, like, the very basics of, you know, like your brain essentially, and moving from there into the intuitive eating, because you can only intuitively eat, which is, you know, eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full. But within that, eating and actually enjoying it, not speed eating it, being aware of the food that is going into your body and not just binging on it or purging it. But that comes back to just living in that parasympathetic state.
To, like, slow down enough to see, like, what foods feel good in your body, what foods don't. And I think the bigger thing is, like, enjoying it. I just talked about this with the Only Nutritionist a couple weeks back on the podcast, but we talked about, like, you're going to want the damn cake sometimes. Yes. That's okay. Enjoy it. My God. But make it this, like, enjoyable experience instead of being like, oh my God, I'm so fat. Like, why am I eating this cake? your brain's picking up on that and it's saying, oh, this cake's gonna make me fat, and it's gonna make that happen.
Yeah.
Instead, if you're like, I'm so grateful I get to enjoy this luxury today, and like enjoy it.
And I call it with my clients false pleasure versus a true pleasure. So eating a slice of cake, sitting down, enjoying it, savoring it, being like, this is fucking delicious. This is really good. I like wanted this cake. This is amazing. Versus a false pleasure of, I'm going to eat 5 slices of cake over the kitchen sink because I'm a bad person. I deserve to feel this way. Like false, same cake, exact same cake. So for me in my coaching, it's not about what you eat. You can eat anything. It's about why you're eating it and how you're eating it. That is really the difference in intuitive eating, because the same thing, you can eat a kale salad and hate it the entire time, feel very stressed, be kicking out cortisol, the stress hormone, and just like completely mess up your digestion because you are so mad about eating this kale salad when you wanted the cake, versus, eating the same kale salad, be like, I'm nourishing my body and I feel good. And so it goes for every single type of food. It's like, I was like, it could be a good apple or a bad apple. It's the same apple, but it's how and why you're consuming it.
Yeah, and just slowing down enough to check in. I think we just live in this like go state. Like we're eating on the go. We're like eating at our desks, eating at our computers.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, and and like you said, it's like if you're eating a cake and you're like, I'm gonna gain weight by eating this, so much of digestion is just the physiology behind it. And we take for granted, we don't really even realize how important it is, our mindset, when we are eating. So like that parasympathetic, like if you are stressed when you're eating a piece of cake and you're in that sympathetic state, your body's not going to digest that. It's not.
Yeah, it's going into survival mode. It's going to hold the fat stores.
It wants to hold on that calories. If you're in survival mode, it's like someone's coming to kill us right now. Hold on to the calories of this cake so we can fight them off.
Yeah.
Versus, that cake was so good. I'm going to lie down and take a little nap. Your body's like, okay, clearly there's no threat. We don't need to hold on to these calories right now because I don't think a Viking is going to come over the hill and kill us. So we're just going to let these calories go. And so I think the physiology behind it, and I think it's even kind of related back to the mental health as well. The physiology is today, even, if I was doing this all day long, like how would you perceive me as a person? Like you would think I'm depressed, I'm not doing well, I'm unhealthy. So, but that's what we do on our phones all day.
Right. And we're like awkward towards people. And
closed off.
Closed off, like you don't want to talk to me.
And there's a reason why people do that Superman pose before they do a speech.
Yeah.
Doing this literally triggers in your body, like, we are strong, we're alpha male, we're going to fight, we're here, we're confident.
Testosterone is pulsing through the body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, like if we're like, and I think, honestly, we also need to be very cognizant of the fact that when we're eating, if we're eating like this and we're, I call it the 2 by 2 by 12 rule. So 2 feet on the ground, 2 butt cheeks on your chair, and initially with my clients, I have them even set a timer for 12 minutes. 12 minutes and 12 seconds, just to be very mindful of how long they're taking to eat it. Just because in the beginning, we're so used to just speed eating like this.
Yeah.
And sometimes just having a little timer on the side can just help us be like, oh, I'm actually going to enjoy this. And at the end of the 12 minutes, don't do whatever you want. But sometimes it just takes, honestly, putting a value on that sitting down time to make us realize how fast we have been eating. And I know for me, I would be eating before and I'd have like literally I'd have one butt cheek off the chair because I was ready to go get more. And I was already planning out, because that dopamine is that anticipation of reward, so I was already anticipating getting more food. And so if you're able to kind of like 2 by 2, like the butt cheeks, 1, 2, 2 feet on the floor, and like a bunch of different kind of techniques and strategies, but things that, like make you slow down and be more mindful, eating, sitting up straight, it tells your body it's okay. We're safe to eat these food. All of a sudden, food, which has been this stress, this danger, this threat to you your entire life because it meant weight gain and all these terrible things I'm not going to fit in, now you're reconditioning your brain that this is enjoyable, this is pleasurable, food is safe, food is okay. It's okay to feel full in your stomach. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be loved, you're not going to fit in. And so it's reconditioning, like that neuroplasticity of making food good again.
Yeah, and again, like I love that you're so science-backed, because that's a lot of my, again, like when I talk to people about depression, anxiety, and things, is just coming back to the science and understanding that like stress is called the silent killer in the US because it's like the biggest issue with what's destroying our guts, with what's destroying our bodies, our cardiovascular system. So we need to be talking about that more and the science behind it.
It's so interesting, and I think I dig a lot into the polyvagal theory, and basically it talks about how you move into these different states, like behavioral, and then the fight or flight and the rest and digest, and how basically your different reactions to these things like stress and depression, anxiety are all basically just maladaptive coping mechanisms a lot of the time. And so we are stressed because our body thinks that we're actually in imminent danger. And it's usually just an email from our boss. But our brain can't decipher the difference between we're going to die right now versus this lady emailed me to do this report. And so understanding our brain removes a lot of that fear. And from that, we can kind of like work through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like the world we live in, like the media we watch, like that all triggers the amygdala, right?
Yes.
Like if you're watching like a fight scene on TV, you know it's TV, but your amygdala doesn't know the difference.
Exactly.
And so we're constantly like stressed out. And so being able to do breathing work, being able to do yoga, meditation, things like that to get you back into that calm state of being.
Yeah, and I always tell my clients, like, your brain can't tell the difference between perception and reality. It's why you get scared during a scary movie and you're sweating and you're like tense, and it's like you know it's not happening, but your body doesn't know it's not happening. And so even a lot of the work I do is with visualization, and because it's like with certain foods, like for example, if you have a trigger food, let's visualize together going through and eating this food and enjoying it, going to bed after you eat dinner, and not feeling the need to go to the kitchen and binge or or purge or whatever it is, because it's your brain is afraid of the unknown. But if you can literally replay in your mind this like new scenario of food is okay, food is safe, then it tells your brain thinks it's actually happening. And so you're able to kind of relive that, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, we don't purge after dinner, we don't binge, like we've done this before, this is normal. Instead of like, we've never done this before, your brain's like, oh no, we always binge though, so let's just go back to that. And I think, visualization and the breath work of that is so powerful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that you visualize. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think it's so super, super important to just create that new pathway in your brain, and then just condition it in a very safe way. Because initially, it's really scary to think about eating a trigger food, for example. But if you can visualize yourself doing it first before you do it, it's like you've already done it.
Yeah, I call it like rewriting the story, right?
Absolutely.
Like you get to change it to a new scenario whenever you want.
Exactly.
Just, like,
you get to be the little narrator
of your own life. Yeah. You get to literally make your own rules whenever you want. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
Literally,
really
I could talk to you all day.
I know.
But tell these people where they can find you online and the things that you're up to.
Yeah, so I'm Victoria Evans. At Victoria Evans Official is my Instagram, and my website is www.victoriaevansofficial.com. And I have a podcast as well. It's called Weighing In on Happy. So I talk about eating disorders, mental health, confidence, body image, kind of all those things.
I love that title, Weighing In on Happy.
Yeah,
nice.
I was like, I kind of like that, like the weighing in. And then, for me, I thought weight loss was the answer to happiness. And then kind of everything that surrounds that, I kind of break down and really dig into the science behind different things in the podcast. So I do one-on-one coaching with clients. So I do sessions, like video sessions, because obviously we're here in Bali. My clients are from around the world, so we do video sessions. And we really dig into the science behind our behaviors, and through that we remove that shame and really do all that healing, which I think is super, super crucial and important. And I'd love people to add me on Instagram and just shoot me a DM, because I love to video chat with people in the DMs and connect people's stories. I think it's really important to connect and really understand that you're not alone.
Yeah, you said it earlier with like, you had to realize that you have resources out there and take advantage of them.
Absolutely.
And so we don't have to do this alone, ever.
Yeah. And so many people would be shocked the number of people who are struggling with the exact same things. They think they're the only one.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, you're not a special unicorn. Like, everyone is struggling with these things. It's just we need to talk about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, my last question for you, I've got a lot of women on this podcast. I'm always curious of the answer on this one. If you could instill one lesson in young girls, just one, what would that lesson be?
Oh, wow.
I know.
that's intense, because I'm like picturing my younger self.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would have to look at my own personal story. I feel like that's kind of a subjective question, in the sense that your body is not the answer for self-worth, I would say. Because for me, I thought it was. I thought being skinny was going to mean everything. I thought it was going to be connection. And so developing basically your brain, your personality, your friendships. Like, don't limit yourself to your exterior form, because you're worth so much more than that. And once we realize that, that's how you be happy, and that's how you really live that full up life.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect lesson, because like everything else we're being told is like the exact opposite.
Yeah.
No, that's beautiful. Like I think I grew up with the opposite problem, where I was always like the tiny skinny one, and so I had to identify as that for so long too. And it doesn't matter your body shape, whether you're small, big, whatever, you're always going to feel like it's not right.
It's not enough. Yeah.
Regardless. So I think that's an amazing lesson, especially for young girls, because they're going to be told by the media that is the opposite of the truth.
Yeah.
So
exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on. And if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, make sure to head over to the blog. I'm going to link everything back to Victoria's page. Also give you guys some great information on her, some awesome photos and things. So head over there. And again, if you're watching this on Facebook, YouTube, make sure to subscribe. We do a different video every week, whether it's interviews like this, or I'm teaching yoga, meditation, or just rambling about something that's on my mind that day. Check it out. We'll see you guys next week. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Bye.